Hey, what's up? I'm just coming back with another video. I had some ideas that were on my mind, and I wanted to tie into the two videos that I did about supply and demand, um, and one I did yesterday and one I just uploaded tonight. And I wanted to say that with this, I wanted to come back and say that it's like with some of the ideas I'm attempting in on this channel, but even those two videos, it's like what are you trying to do? Like reinvent sex positions? Like what are you trying to do talking about like this and that to do sex appeal, this and that? But all I'm offering with this is just just ideas for the sake of ideas, and not to better or change or improve anything, but just to practice the skill of reaching for ideas and expressing ideas. And the expressing ourselves is always creative. You almost can't communicate without being creative. So even if you're not happy to be somewhere and like you have to engage someone, you still technically have to be creative. One of the most sometimes I think about like I have like wicked thoughts, like not harming people or myself, but just simply like wicked thoughts, like what would hell be, what could be hell. And one that to add to that would be like, if you're forced to be creative, that might be a form of hell. To be compelled or impelled, those are two words that are very similar. Sometimes I like to look up words, like the inflections and the contrast between words, but compel and impel is very similar. And if you went to hell, like I think that pitchfork the pitchfork that a corrections officer would have in hell, like the red pitchfork and the red uniform to match and the red horns to match. The pitchfork is, I think that's typically an implement, and and the horns might be like a little like a lesser degree of that, but that pitchfork is technically an implement. So that might be related to the word impel. But impel and compel are very similar. Like an example of that is like one time I was around a training venue, and someone offered the idea of like, what is that if someone wakes you up in the middle of the night, the middle of the night from sleep, and it's time to go run right now but not only run, but run as a group where you're held to a cadence. What would that be like? Some people could say that would be fun. Some people could say that'd be hell. If you're in a situation, if you're comfortable with waking up from complete equipoise rest to jump off into running like that may be a strong suit. Just the ability, because one of the hardest things in life, what's actually harder than effort or even endurance, is to switch gears. So I'm sitting here like this, now I'm going, now I'm stopped, now I'm a little bit going, now I'm going, now I'm stopped, now I'm resting, now I'm going, now I'm stopped, now I'm going again. Like that going in between intervals like that I think they call it interval training. That's a form of training. That's more daunting, but also it creates more strength. For a long time I did deliveries in a hatchback stick shift, and I think it was the best thing, because the changing of gears, it kept you more alert, and you're more engaged in the driving like sometimes like well-to-do cars, like fancy cars, they'll be made as a manual, even though people are spending like multiple hundreds of $1,000s on a car, but they'll get a manual. And a person might not appreciate why you would do something like that, but it can be funner, but also like a richer experience of driving. And also you're more it's a deeper experience of driving, and you're connected to the experience in the road differently, because you're aware of the torque, you're aware of the demands of the terrain when you're switching through gears like that. So it can be you actually have more control and command of the car, and it's actually funner to drive the car and also ride with someone when they're driving a stick shift, if they can really do it smoothly, or it just demonstrates greater control. A lot of us, we're impressed, but the only thing more impressive than power is actually control. Because control is like, that's like a higher, because like a lot of people are impressed with power and enjoy power, but are also wasteful with power, like get off on power. But a higher degree of power is actually to be disaffected, to be not attached to things, not even power. So if you can be disattached, disavowed, aloof to power, while also employing power efficiently, with economy. That's probably the highest expression of power may actually be economy. And that's what this existence is attributed as one. So this existence is not, in its essence, is not perceivable by mortals under normal circumstances, because it doesn't betray itself, because there's no attribute that you can affix to something. Most things can be recognized by their attributes and also their impurities, according to Arthur Avalon. Like when you look at my face on this camera, it's actually the impurities of my face that would stand out and would make it contrast with light, and give it the contrast and distinction that you can make out what my face is. But if my face were completely pure, or like a mirror, like glass can be appreciated as very fine and pure, so can crystal. I think, I'm not sure if mirrors are actually made out of crystal, but crystal is a very fine substance. I think actually these phones, they use crystal to communicate. That if you've ever had like a crystal glass, like my mother had a crystal glass, and if you just tap it, it rings out like that, because it's a very fine, pure substance. But it's almost imperceivable because it doesn't betray itself. It doesn't give itself away, because it's congruent. So a better word than purity would actually be congruence. So because something can be dark or light, good or bad, but what makes it true is just the more congruent it is, the more similarity it has to itself, the more singularity of purpose. This entire existence is very like dynamic, dual, multifaceted, complex, profound. But the deepest part of it, or the actual beauty, might actually be what's singular within what's more than singular. So this existence has so many expressions, iterations, purposes, complements, detriments, contrasts. But whatever would be singular within it would maybe the highest beauty, according to Nietzsche. Nietzsche was an intellectual. Some of our ideas, like I think like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I think that might have been Nietzsche that said that. He said that type of stuff. He was one of those type of thinkers that he's attributed with being an intellectual, but he wasn't an intellectual for the sake of intellectual. He was more so of just thinking a type of way is the type of person he was, and a lot of it is in going up against and challenging. He's just simply like, he was a type of person to challenge things, challenge his own thoughts, challenge the thoughts of other. That might be the deepest form of challenge, is to challenge your own thoughts and other people's thoughts, and what of other people's thoughts are your thoughts, and what of your thoughts are other people's thoughts. To challenge that in a compelling way, in a unique way. That might be the deepest form of difficulty. And then if you were to be true to what you ascertained and live up to that, that could amount to any form of difficulty, daring, expense, intrepidness, initiative, success, failure, torment, joy, grief, loss, any of that, if you were to live up to that. But the premise of it would actually be just challenging thoughts, but actually being true to what you discover of challenging thoughts. But according to him, this profound thinker who had the type of experiences to go with that, I've quoted Robert Greene, is that some of the beautiful women of that time, not just beautiful in terms of like aesthetics, but beautiful in terms of like sex appeal and sensuality and daringness and shamelessness and boldness, but also maybe like grace, all that combined. He would have experiences with people like that. And it would a lot of love is like, you have like the loved, the lover, and then that one that is jilted, in that dynamic of like, according to Osho, is that there's always multiple people in a love in a love exchange, because one is that we're dual, we're multifaceted, us as people, and we're duplex in nature. I've said that in this channel, quoting Arthur Avalon: 2 brains, 2 nostrils, 2 eyes, 2 parents. But then they also had 2 parents also. So when you're making love, there's at least 2 sides of you, because that's a lot of what makes us able to exist in a dynamic, unified, but also dynamic existence. We're wavering. That might actually be the sensation of thought, is to waver like that. Is it right or left? So we're always somewhere between right and left, up and down, hot and cold, good and bad at all times. But the play of that, the shifting of that, but then our tendencies within that, our leniencies within that, our choices within that, It amounts to these things called sanskaras, according to Arthur Avalon, which is our unique tendencies, which are also our propensities, and we may inherit them from ourselves, and bestow them to ourselves in the form of our past ancestors, our present iteration, and our future descendants. We're receiving and giving ourself to ourself, from ourself to ourself, and to others, and back to ourself. And that amounts to these tendencies that they can shape some of our interests, our passion, and our strong suits, and maybe our weak points, which both your strong points and your weak points are both pivotal and necessary to your development and your overall success and failure, which are also important to your success and failure. But we're wavering like that. But it's also because we're dynamic, and we're dual. In many senses, we're dual like that. But when you're making love and like coming together, there's the two sides of you, because you have like two thoughts about almost anything. There's the two sides of your partner. Then there's their multifaceted ancestors, their experiences, the people who shaped them, their friend. A lot of your prominent friends, like in adolescence, are a lot of who you are. They shape your interests and your attitudes and your mannerisms and your tendencies finer than you can appreciate on a conscious level. But you have all that going on between like people making love. So it actually, even if you're making love, like you're being together with someone, just you and that person, there's the different sides of you where it actually feels like a group thing, like it's like a group affair just for two people to be together. But then on top of that, there's likely another person that's somewhat left out of that, or denied for that to happen, or something like that, where a lot of love is actually like something of a love triangle. Even between that might be some of what animosity is that there's just the two of us, but there's something of another person that we can perceive. Or there's the two of us, there's one person's experience, the other person's experience, and then the sensation of what the other person's experience would be, and that person's experience of this experience, that would amount to almost like another party there. And that other party, they say that two is company, but three is a crowd, even when it's only two having company. But so you always have like different appreciation of a love exchange, and who would support that and make that viable, but also who would lose out for that. So this Nietzsche, he had experiences like that, where this woman was about sensual enough, sexual enough to make men go out of their mind, especially back then, before we had access to type media and like images of like nudity and stuff like that. You could really lose yourself. I would imagine, like falling in love back in the day. You could lose yourself socially a lot of ways, like through isolation, but also like just like falling in love would probably be deeper when you had less access to, like, because we've been seeing so many images of lovemaking and beautiful people our whole life, like being inundated with media, that there's a financial incentive for anything that would appear in front of you, but also how much of it, if you think of what's been presented to you over your lifetime, it's really inordinate for a human being, and it might actually stifle some of the sensation and the experience. Like sometimes people would say they're not satisfied with lovers and lovemaking, or people in general, friends in general, but that might actually just be because we've been inundated so much that it's not as profound and fresh and sublime as it would be in normal circumstances prior to like the explosion of like mass media and instant sophisticated communication, for lack of a better word. But people could really fall in love back in the day, and this Nietzsche had experiences like that, where this type of the intellectual circles he was with, but also the type of people that would attract, and that was very potent. But to him, even having that experience, the deepest beauty was men marching to war, men marching to a cadence. That might actually speak to something of singularity right there, is that he appreciated the beauty, the sublimeness of singularity. Another example of singularity is that there's almost nothing more singular of purpose and essence than the flame, than fire. But also fire, it flickers and wavers like that. So it's interesting that fire is almost like this existence. I think you could explain a lot of this existence simply as fire. They say that there's earth, wind, and fire as like the fundamental elements. I think they exist within and through and by means of, and are possible because of something called the ether. that's finer than I can enunciate, but I am familiar with something called an ether, which is like a substratum of fine material, or maybe just the however, like, so sometimes a fish doesn't know it's in water, a universe doesn't know it's in ether. So we're actually in something of ether, like a something similar to water, but finer than water. The atmosphere may be an example of ether. Some of the more dense, blatant that ranges of ether that we can perceive with our default perception as human beings. But things always exist on a range, and we more so only experience what is appropriate to our range of activity and the purposes that we serve. But there's always much broader, finer, and also more of normal than we can appreciate that's existing. And a lot of it may be the ether. So there may actually only be one substance. If anything, if all is possible by means of and through the ether, all may also be the ether. But the maybe the greatest expression, the truest expression of ether that we can appreciate is fire. Because what is fire? Fire is more of a phenomenon than an actual reality. Even though it may be the deepest of reality, a lot of that we're having experiences of reality. Like right now, you got inordinate amounts of vehicles flying up and down the road in the middle of the night. There's not a lot of productivity you'd be doing right now, so it's probably likely for fun and stuff like that. People out right now, but or people servicing people having fun. But it's possible by means of fire. And even this phone that I'm communicating on, it's still possible by means of fire. It was wrought, the parts of it, the manufacturing of it was possible by fire. People to have the health and standpoint and time on their hands to fathom it and put it together is by means of fire. And then also some of the electrical components are by means of what has either been created with fire, like steam, solar energy, coal energy, that amounts to this electric activity. So nothing comes from nowhere, not the least of which energy. But the finest example of that might actually be fire. And fire and ether may be synonymous in that you can't exactly lay a finger on it and define it, but you can appreciate it as a property, and by means of any other property or thing to exist is possible through. But fire is interesting that, like, right now there's actually a light flickering over there. I'm gonna see if you can see that in there. Like it lends itself to this video. So you got some sketchy lights going on, and that's always kind of like a tip off, like when you see lights, because these are businesses, like in a business suite park. You can imagine that it's not cheap to have like a storefront here, to have a place where you can tell people that they're welcome to come here or get the hell out. And you also don't have like the authorities kicking in your door as an owner. So it ain't cheap to be here. But somehow they can't afford to put the lights on. So that sometimes things aren't always what they seem. And like, it's kind of interesting, like when things go, it almost be interesting like to have a book just simply about things going belly up. People, you can have my face on the cover of it. People and things that go belly up. But a lot of stuff is going, a lot of stuff is going belly up. I don't mean to be blasting. So I'm near a state school, one of your larger state schools in the country. And I didn't mean to be blasting businesses, but I think they got the big old emblem of that state school over there, and they can't seem to put the lights on. No, these schools, they get so many. So this school, it probably has at least like 50,000 students there. And it's almost like a town in itself. But then you also got they probably each cough up at least $50,000 while they're there in that time. So how much money are they not spending to be at school? But then this thing that got the emblem of the school, they can't keep the lights on. So things aren't always what they seem, and maybe money's not really real if you can't put the lights on, as you got 50,000 people paying $50,000. So what are dollars then? But now I'm getting off on it. I'm trying to be fun. I actually wasn't having the energy to be funny with that, but that's similar to fire, the way that it's flickering like that. That fire, it kind of flickers like that. So fire is wavering, but also it's still congruent within its wavering, that its purpose doesn't waver. You can maybe say fire doesn't waver, we waver. So while we perceive fire to waver because we're actually more so wavering, but fire itself may not actually waver. The universe may be wavering and it's making the fire to look like it's wavering, but the fire at essence may not be anything of wavering. It may be the most singular thing that there is fire. Because what's more serious than fire? What commands your attention more than fire when fire is present or upon you? When I was young, one time I was young. Sometimes it's interesting if you actually looked at the artwork of young people, that may be some of the deepest art that you may come across, because a lot of times, like, young people, when they do art, they actually do, a lot of young people, they have gifts that they were never inculcated in, or that they never had training in, and that they had never done before they did it. Like, you can have a young person that's excellent at music, sports, art, something like that. Like, I had a coworker who, if you're really about something, you can talk about it ad nauseum, and someone doesn't have to be from that background, but whatever they've experienced of life is enough of a context for them to meet you in that conversation if you're really about that. So I met a woman like that, my first professional driving job, like driving people, and she was heavy set because I discovered that she had something go on with her thyroid. But she showed me a picture of herself from before she had the aftermath of the thyroid, and she was a smoke show. She was drop dead gorgeous, but also she was like she couldn't say anything without sounding poetic. She was like from St. Louis, so she couldn't just talk like I'm talking. Like, she would have to sound smoother than hell, like the way that she said things. But she wasn't just like making it up. Like, it was actually from like a culture. Like, she's like really from a culture. Like, we've lost like a lot of culture in the West. Like, as much as like we share things like television, mass media, we've really lost some of the older culture, like the shared expressions, shared idioms, but also how you can be creative with shared expressions and shared idioms. I used to really appreciate that when I was a young person. Like, I would just appreciate words when I was young, and like verbalism, but especially like from a culture like from the the American South. So I would have like elderly people that I served at a nursing home, people that I met in church, and then people that I knew in the South when I went to the South, or that I experienced. And I was just always impressed by how creative you could be with something that's shared, like culture. But this woman was like that she couldn't say anything without just having it sound really smooth, like smoother than hell when she would say something, but also eloquent like that. But she could talk about food for, I'd actually talk with her. So she would come with me like on a afternoon, like 3 tiers, 3 schools in the afternoon, from the base to do 3 schools, and then to get back to base like that. That's a few hours that you have on your hands with someone, and we would just talk about nothing but food that time, and it was interesting, like, how she could talk about food like that. But she told me that when she was young, she would start cooking. Like, she has some of her first memories are of cooking, but she would cook this outstanding stuff, and nobody had taught her how to cook, and she just somehow could do it. She would have ideas for cooking, and she would be an excellent cook without having learned it. And I think that sometimes art is like that for young people, where I would one time I was in a class, I would draw these pictures like they would give us these planners in school, and they wanted you to use your planner. Like, they'd actually give us some really nice planners. Like, when I was in middle school, they gave us this planner. They started this thing in my city where they had like St. Paul reads 25. So every student was mandated to read 25 books. So I exactly put together 25 books on the last day of the school year, and I wrote down like the titles to them, like, to turn that in, because the superintendent of the Twin Cities demanded that all students read 25 books in a year. That was about the best superintendent of all time, because later in life I became an avid reader. But I think I became a reader. Sometimes you don't appreciate how subtle influences reach you. I think I became a reader because I had it in my mind that a person could actually read 25 books in a year and be expected to do that. And so shout out to that superintendent. I don't remember her name, but she was outstanding. Like, that's a real educator like that, because it's heavy, like, to demand children to do something like that. But somehow we live up to expectations that are put upon us as children, even despite ourselves, because that's the influence and the role that our authority figures have as children. So she was outstanding for that. But so we would have these planners, and that year that they did that, like in I was in 8th grade that year. That was one of my best years. That was one of my standout years in school, because I would like, a lot of people, they say that extracurricular activities are good, but I think that pre-curricular activities are even better. So if you have something that gets kids to come to school before school, but also gets them to get themselves to school before school. Like I grew up like around a college campus where my father taught, not this state school where I'm at, but a nearby school, even more elite than this state school, more expensive, but not, but smaller. That school, my best friend, his mother was a janitor at that school. My father was a professor. His mother was a janitor, but she was actually more cultured, and she was more, I think she was actually more cultured than my father. Like even that's kind of a bold thing to say, and I don't mean that with disrespect, but she was from the foundational Black American culture, but her ways of doing things was very classy. She was class par excellence, and her approach to work was also class par excellence. She may have been the most classy person I've met in my life. And actually my experience of coming into faith was possible because of her older daughter, but then also her older daughter exposure to her that would put her interested in church, where this woman, she wasn't all about church and all about just being righteous for the sake of righteous, but she was about class in the first place. She was about class more so than anything. And I learned a lot about priorities for her, like, because I always be like getting her son to come off and play basketball with me after school, and she would be having an issue that he didn't get the dishes done, or he didn't have his homework done before my ass showed up there, and that this homework thing is more important than the hoop dreams even. And even if you're going to get good at hooping, you need to have your schoolwork sorted out. Otherwise, you're not going to make it on the team, or you're not going to have the seasoning to do well on the team, because the learning is important for a young person, more so than even success or excelling. Learning is important. But I would be exposed to that around her. But then also she was just she was elegant, and really, like, she had a sophisticated work. She was a very sophisticated person, but also she was humble enough to do manual labor that made the school enjoyable and clean and a decent place to. That may be actually the most fundamental role at a college campus, is actually the custodial crew, because how can you learn somewhere where it's not clean and decent and pleasant? How can you do well there when it's not pleasant? Just imagine like the greatest school in the world, but it kind of stinks in here, it's kind of dingy, or they didn't actually clean it all the way last night, or it looks half-assed like that. How's that going to change your experience of quality? So she actually my dad put the learning in that school. He did put learning down and discipline on those students, because he would discipline your ass whether you're his son or you're a grown ass. He actually had superintendents in his classes, like principals, superintendents, like a high level educated people, and whether you appreciate that as like outstanding or not, but he would put discipline on their ass too. But she actually put the quality in that school, because they wouldn't have had no quality of experience of education without what my friend's mother did. But she I digressed a little bit with that, but she was but at that school there, so we both lived on that campus, me and my best friend, because our housing there, we lived on these houses. It was the same block. It was on different streets, but it's the same city block. So he was on the next block street over, parallel streets. I was on like this famous street where F. Scott Fitzgerald was from. I was on that facing side. He was on the other side. His house was actually bigger. Like he had like a basement and like more rooms. But my house was like on that fancy street, but it was the same block. But we get up in the morning, like before school. Like, so school starts pretty early for middle school in the first place. But we'd get up, there's this bus. It would idle the beginning of that route. It would idle there in front of that school, which is also in front of our house, like the same block. We'd get out onto that bus like early, sit on that bus before the route started. Then the route would start. It'd take us like a mile. We'd get to school. Then we'd get to school with a handful, but also a good handful of other knuckleheads, young people that also got their self to school before the buses got in, before a lot of people's parents would drop them off, to get to school and enjoy open gym. There's this dope ass Mr. Humphrey. Was that his name? I think Mr. Humphrey, he would open up that gym early and have these big old yellow basketballs so that we could play basketball in the morning before school started. He would break out the basketballs early so we could get it on and play basketball scrimmage in the morning. There was some politics about that. Like there was like some, you have a pecking order to anything. So there was some politics in that, and it wasn't always like rock and roll, because with kids it's kind of like it's kind of like what's that book called? There's a book about these kids that mutiny and cannibalize each other when they're marooned. Lord of the Flies. So anytime you get young people together, it's gonna be like Lord of the Flies. But it was by and large more so of succeeding in school, because our ass had enough discipline and initiative to get off to school before everyone else did. And I think I replicated that a lot of my life, because like right now I'm getting ready to work before it's even morning, and then a lot of my life I'm content to get up and start getting after it before when a lot of people are like enjoying their last few hours of sleep or fighting with their alarm clock. I already been working for 5 or 6 hours. And that's a lot of like what some of those experiences as a child, you don't appreciate how they're shaping you as an adult. But shout out to that teacher for breaking out those yellow basketballs before school started. And we'd always be on this bus, like me and my friend, and there's this crazy bus driver that he was a character, that bus driver, and he would talk to us. Like, he didn't say nothing that was inappropriate for kids, but he would talk to us kids like some people from the old school, like they're a grown-ass man, and they know you're getting ready to be a grown-ass man in a couple years, so they don't sugarcoat anything for you, like in front of your face. Like, even though as it's appropriate, they're gonna be straight with you. So he'd be like, our school, the middle school, to this day, it's outside of an art store. It's an art store. It's like it's a store called it's an art store that's across the street from a middle school to this day. And that was over 25 years ago. I shouldn't date myself like that if I still want to be able to get dates, but it's been there for a long time. Both are historical, the art store and the school. But the store is called Something Paint, and so there'd always be like this kind of sketchy guy that get on the bus, like right there where we got off at school, and and that store wouldn't be open that early, but it's named Something Paint. And he was that bus driver was like, yeah, man. He's like, you see how he's always getting on there by the paint store, man. I think he might be. he was suggesting to us that this man was hawking paint, is why he would get on by the paint store every day like that. But he was dead serious about that. Like, yeah, man, he's always getting on by that paint store over there, man. But it was funny how he said it. Like, me and my friend, we had the same. Your real friends in life, I think your real friends are the people that got the same sense of humor of you. That's why your ass would that's why you would still be around each other even as much as you can't stand each other, because you can't get over the fact that you just got the same sense of humor. Maybe the same sense in gangster movies. Like, for me and that friend, we had the same taste in gangster movies and comedy. We weren't so big about horror movies and stuff like that, but we got along with hip hop. We liked the same hip hop, but we didn't like that we liked the same hip hop, because we would fight like cats and dogs over hip hop. Like, even he would show me like some of the coldest songs. Like, there'd be the song he put me on a lot of music, but I put him on some too. But he put me on a lot of music, and he put me on he came from a family where he would bump hip hop in front of his mom. Like, even as classy as his mom was, he was of that congruent of a background that he could just bump that, like Bone Thugs and Harmony, Biggie Smalls, right there in front of his mom, his older brother, his older sister, because they still enjoyed hip hop like that. I think that's actually what folk music used to be back in the day. Like, before we had gospel and R&B and blues, we had folk music, which is part of all that. So you could say that to this day, folk music is part of rap, hip hop, R&B, gospel, blues, rock, funk, country, EDM, you name it. It has something of folk in there. And if you look at a lot of people's playlists, even good old church folks, if you look at their playlists or like what I remember one time we were in church, and so I grew up. I think that childhood actually goes into some of your adult years, as you're still developing like that, and you're still very impressionable like that, even as a young person old enough to vote. So I grew up around a family like a basketball family. Their father was a referee, but they're very influential in the community, and they're awesome family to grow up around. But I remember, and also there was an awesome musician in the church. We were in this summer camp together, but he and I, but he was already an outstanding musician because his father had been, and so he was like he led the choir like before he had even got out of high school. But one time he could do anything with the piano, he could play anything at all with the piano. So he'd play this awesome like gospel music. Like he could do altar calls. He could make you actually experience the closest I ever got to the sensation of rapture, a rapturous experience. That had been him responsible for that, because it was I had an insight in life. True love is to regard the best interests of another person with your heart. That occurred to me the day of New Year's, before the year 2006. And I went to a church service like that with that on my mind. And I had a beautiful experience because he was responsible for that, what he was doing with the choir like that. But then we had some great orators in there. Like there was a outstanding religious leader here in the Twin Cities who was he was an understudy of a greater religious leader in Southern California, who would commute and actually have some oversight of our church. But one time that greater teacher was there, and that greater teacher had a yet greater teacher who one time appeared like during one of these there was like a conference that drew people from around the country, and our great teacher, his teacher's teacher showed up, but he was more of a scholar. He wasn't as much of an orator. That's one of the influences on me that appreciated the beauty of scholarship, like to just talk heavy. Like he would talk heavy about, but he would have sources to back what he was talking about, but he would talk heavy like that, and people knew the gravity of what he was saying because he had done the research. So if you do your research, you can talk heavy like that. But one time that the intermediary one, the one that was over our teacher, he was referencing like hip hop, so the choir leader who was like 2 years older than me in school, but like still a peer. We were very close, like not close, but we were very familiar with each other because we had worked at a summer camp like around some other beautiful girls our age, and we just like there's like me, him, and two other girls that first year. Then the second year it was me, him, one of the girls, and then some younger junior counselors. But we had a lot of experience, him and I, like protecting, looking after young people with the responsibility on our hands as young people, like taking them for field trips across the city, walking great distances with small children, taking children to swimming pools and stuff like that. He and I were from that background, but we were also like a little bit like at odds for some odd reason. But he did this. There's like this beat by it's a beat by it's one of your East Coast, like back in the day you had East Coast and West Coast music, but they were both equally great. I think you had like the whole bad boy scene, your Harlem rappers. A lot of East Coast rappers were cold with it in the 90s. So were West Coast, but they were a little bit different, like a little bit different swag. You kind of had to be from the era to really feel the difference. But maybe even someone looking back now could feel the difference. But there's this song like dinner, 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 dinner. I know you heard me on the radio. True, I know you see me in the video. True, but you still don't pay me no attention. Listening to what your girlfriends mention. He's a slut, he's a hoe, he's a freak. Got a different girl every day of the week. That's cool, not trying to put a rush on you, but I had to let you know that I got a crush on you. There's that song. That's a cool song. That's a Biggie Small song. But the music to that, dinner, 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 dun, dun. That's a lot of what the 90s is about. If you weren't here for the 90s, or you don't remember the 90s, if you bump that song, that's what the 90s felt like. That's what the 90s were about, like from my experience. And so for the purposes of like of a demonstration of a lesson in church, my friend, that person I'm calling my friend, the choir leader, he wasn't always a friend to me, because I remember one time I showed him respect. Like it was after a service, and I walked up to shake his hand, and he actually like blew me off, like in front of, like as an appearance, he blew me off like that when I was trying to show him like solidarity and respect, because we had went back like that. So that was actually like a bogus thing he did. So even your most talented people, they can be bogus and whack. Because we all were still learning. But he was, you can't deny a person's talent. So he would be like, he'd play that song, dinner, 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 dinner. And then my the family that was from my same block, that's still from my parents' block, they the lady who, she was like an elder in the community, a real leader in the community, one of the saints of the community. She wouldn't call herself a saint, but she has that kind of impact. Their whole family, that's a unique family. But she was like, she got up out of her seat. She was like, yeah, she was like, dinner. She was like, she was really getting one off in front of everyone. She needed that release to bump that dinner, 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 dinner. Everyone can feel that song. Even our mom and dad can feel that song, and she was rocking with it. But that's an example of how that's actually folk music. Is that if you were to look at some good old church folks playlist, what they actually rock with, what speaks to them, it's just folk music. If you were to combine everyone's influences, what they really rock with, what they enjoy, man, I don't like that hip hop stuff, but I just like the beat. Yeah, you just like the folk of it. So rap, hip hop, R&B, gospel, blues, anything near about is folk music like that. But I digress a little bit with that. But but yeah, so we'd be going up to school, like him and I was winning that year, that 8th grade year, because I was using that planner. Something about putting your mind down. Like, I would plan out all my homework, and I just enjoyed crossing things off that I had planned and I got done like that. That was like goal setting. That was like actually goal setting, but then actually knocking it down, living it up to that'll change a person's life in their experience like that. So then I also had sports going on, but just getting up and getting off to school before school was outstanding like that. And then we had that guy who was funnier than hell like that. There's also a woman on that bus. I seen her within the last couple of weeks. She was very eccentric at that time. She would be like she would talk to herself. She's actually one of the most if you're from a city long enough, there's a few people that stand out in a city, very unique people. There was another man in the Highland Village that I've seen over the years a lot when I worked there in the past, but even this year. And you don't know who he's a little bit like Mr. Rogers. He's very tall and almost a little bit too pleasant. You can't trust a person that pleasant like that. Oh, hi. How are things? Oh, that's very nice. And how is business around here? Are you keeping up with business? Like, he would ask me stuff like that, like when I was working as a clerk in the area there in Highland Park. But I'd always see him out in the community with a vest on, cleaning up trash, doing different, very humble things to make the place better. That's a real. That'd be worth like writing a piece about someone like that. There's a few people that stand out in a city like that you can't. Some people would say like you're elect and chosen people. Your elect and chosen people are going to be farthest the hell away from a church, likely, because they're not into a church can be appreciated as a nightclub, and like a social club, and you might actually do better in church if you just simply appreciate it as a social club and didn't want anything more or less from it than what you would get as a social club, a more like a daytime hour social club scene where you also got to, because in a nightclub you can't bring your children to the nightclub. They don't have a daycare there, but you get to dress up and be around beautiful people at a nightclub, but you got to have your kids off with like their relatives or like your relatives that might have other things to do, but they're humoring you to go do your thing around other adults. But a lot of churches like that too, where it's like a nightclub, it's a day club, but they have a better accommodation for your children and you have more of a reason to be there. But it functions a lot like just another social club. And if you appreciate it, and it might segue into the same experiences that a nightclub would, or similar like that. Despite whatever, or with and without whatever homage we pay to like doctrine and dogma, but it's still a social club like that. But so I was like I was doing well that year with the planner. But then one thing I would do, but then when I got older in school, like in high school, one time I was drawing a picture like in my art. It was a math class, but it was a similar planner like that we'd all been given. By that point, it wasn't as cool of a planner as I had in middle school, but I was just drawing on this planner, and I drew a picture of like somebody of a person like looking at a flame, like a person like just a person looking at a flame like that. And it actually scared this girl that was next to me. Like, this girl, I think she kind of had a crush on me, because like a lot of your underclassmen in school, they'll have a crush on the upperclassmen, and then you as an upperclassman, you're cool and you're nice to the younger people. You're not interested in them the same way like that, because when you're young like that, I think that like when we're young, we have better instincts about life, so we're not comfortable always like dating or being friends with someone even 1 or 2 years younger than us in school like that. But a lot of times you'll have like younger, like a lot. I had a lot of female friends in school. More of my friends in school were females. I always sat by the females at lunch because a lot of the dudes they're just asses to be around. Like I had these people that I grew up with, like friends of my mother's friends from before I was born. I go to these parties with my mother's friends, like as a like elementary and middle school. Those kind of parties where you're at your parents' friend's house and you're staying up late, but it's actually kind of uncomfortable because you're not from there and you want to just go you want to rest somewhere, but they have like this kind of like, it gets nasty at a certain point where you're not at home and you're at your parents' friend's house and their ass are drunk and they're having like whack conversation and it's getting kind of boring, but you're still stuck there, and so you meet their family and stuff like that. But some of these people, my mom's older friends' family that were my same age, they'd be at my same school, like elementary, middle school and high school, and then they'd be punking me out of my seat at the damn lunch table like that. Like we go way the hell back, or at least our parents do. Our parents go all the way back to taking trips across the country and eating seafood together before our asses were born. And you know that about me, but we were always at these whack parties together where you know who I am, you at least know my family. I at least know how much your house stinks. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I know how uncomfortable it can be in your house. And I played video games with you in a dingy basement. And then we're in school like that at the lunch table, and it's like, hey, what's up, man? Hey, man, I need this seat. I don't know, but I need this seat. And now this dude was big as hell. Like he was on the football team, but he was on the line. And he was also like a senior by the time I was like a freshman or sophomore. So if you think I got up for him, you're damn right about that. Because I wasn't about to lose nothing, like trying to stand up to someone that was going to squash me like a bug, even if we went back or not. But that's how whack a lot of dudes are in school. That's just an example. That's dudes in school for you. So I was never like, I would go up with the jocks like in sports and stuff, but I was never like down with the jocks. I was more so cool with the females, or at least I had less problem with the females, and I'll blend in around them like that, or at least I thought. But so I'd be having like a lot of female friends in school. When I was younger, it was the upperclassmen were my friends. Then when I was an upperclassman, the underclassmen were my friends, but a lot of them would be having a crush on you, like if you really knew how they feel. These girls in school, like the underclassmen. But this underclassmen girl, she looked at that picture that I had drawn. I don't know how I drew that or what inspired that, but it actually scared her like that, what I had drawn. When a child draws something like that, because I was still a child, that's actually that's on their spirit, that's on their soul. Some of the things that a young person can do without training is actually that's they've seen that somewhere, so they can draw whatsoever in the hell they've seen, whether they've been trained to draw or not. So, but that's actually something of a warning, is that some of the things you would say, some of the art that would come out of you, it's actually a warning. So she may have recognized, that's the universe, because she's also the universe. That's the universe recognizing that you have something at play, some kind of cycles at play, something you've seen and therefore are a part of as a cycle that's about you, that's coming through you, that could potentially come back to injure you at any point. And if it's really a cycle, it's with you your whole life, because there's no exiting a cycle. There's only introducing a new range or expression of a cycle. But that's actually what's so damning about cycles, is that actually the completion of the cycle is part of the initiation of the cycle. So once a cycle is initiated, it's actually already almost complete, and it's just nothing but grace and providence and divine intervention that keeps us from experiencing the brunt or the worst of a cycle once it's at play. But so I a little bit, but that was a flame like that singularity of looking at a flame. And so Nietzsche would appreciate the singularity of flame, but I meant to say that a lot of what may be profound about this existence is how can what is actually singular about this existence is what is maybe beautiful. That might be what impressed Nietzsche about men going off to war, is the singularity of purpose in mind. And sometimes you don't appreciate how connected we are, but when you get people as a group on the same page or something, you get an actual platoon on the same page about something, like actually moving their eyeballs in unison, like eyeballs click, everybody clicks their eyeballs to the same cue. That's deep, that's beyond power, because whatever we have of power, it's done by human beings, but more so individual human beings. You get a group of human beings on the same page like that with discipline and initiative. That's really potent like that. But all things have a check mechanism, and I think that for human beings, internecine is a checking mechanism that is infighting. So even if you had the most robust, outstanding platoon that was completely singular of purpose, it's still checked. Otherwise, it would get out of control, and the universe wouldn't be viable. So you'll have infighting with it, or even if you didn't have infighting, it may serve something like a broader structure or nation that does have infighting in it, so it can be limited by that. But that's one of the deepest things, is that singularity like that. And that's what Nietzsche was talking about, or that was he was reaching for, I think, when he was talking about the most beautiful thing is men marching at a cadence. What I wanted to say is that with this series, I didn't mean so I'm only offering these videos in the spirit of attempting and developing the practice and a knack for fathoming ideas in real time that may be original as a skill set. But I didn't mean to reinvent like what sex is or make the experience. I want to respect the wheel. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I want to respect sex. I don't want to reinvent sex. But one thing that I wanted to add on to this series about supply and demand is that I stand by the statements that I made, but a deeper thing is to say that sex and death are not entirely different. It may be different poles of the same experience, different ranges of it that actually overlap and reinform one another. So it's been said that there's a life current and a death current. So there's this series on Vice where there's this form so I've mentioned that entheogens is a better word than drug. Drug is like a buzzword that's a part of social engineering. It's also a code word that allows for the designation of resources and also the application of duty, punishment, incarceration, and different forms of social control that are invoked and authorized and sustained by the cooperation that's invoked by using code words on people. So code words is part of power. Code words is part of that, and drugs is like a code word. But the real term, a more accurate but also appropriate term for things that would alter a person's consciousness is entheogens, according to Morris Brooklyn, and that can involve like plant material, metals, and minerals, and also animal material, and even human material probably too, which are still animal material. And so there'd be like there's these frogs that people can get high with in certain areas if they're skilled in curating it, because most things, this life is actually poison because this life filters itself. So a lot of things are wicked and deadly because this life is so clean that it's the best form of cleaning is actually poison. Your different cleaning solvents that you would have are some of the strongest, lethalest, deadliest poison that may be available to civilians is cleaning agents, solvents. But the reality itself is its own cleaning agent and solvent, and from that standpoint, it's poison, according to like the Eastern thought. And the only thing that can save from poison is a better, more skillful, more favorable poison. But it's all still poison like that. So these different things, even entheogens, they're just different forms of poison. A lot of like the benefit of a plant, according to Nassim Nicholas Taleb, is its detriment. So like plants protect themselves, like roughage. Like it's difficult. You can't eat too much roughage without getting sick. That's because roughage is actually protecting itself. And some of the health benefits is your body. It's like counterintuitive. So your body is responding to and overcoming the actual detriment of the plant. And in doing so, there's a health benefit derived. So it's kind of like a symbiotic. It's like a very complex, inverse, counterintuitive, symbiotic relationship that we have, even with the very things that are sustaining us. So plants are not just for nutrition; they're actually for poison, and they're a favorable poison. So you have different, like you have like probiotics, like you have maybe biotic, like you have bacteria. And then you also have beneficial bacteria that's still bacteria, but it works out in your favor, kind of like robbers that are on the same team like that, where their ass are still robbers that whole time, but as long as there's a shared purpose, for now it works out. And so that's like a lot of what life is, and for now it's working. that, but also like plant material, but things that you would call entheogens are like poison. So these frogs can be like that, and people can get higher than shit off of frogs, because that's actually poison designed to near about kill you. And it does near about kill you, if not kill you, but not all the way kill you, if you can come back, if you can ride that out. So the experience of that, you actually may go into something of what is a preliminary stage, or some stage of actual death. Maybe a combination of like paralysis, death, ecstasy, the different sensations that are part of your experience of a human being, and the latter of which, the ending of something, is sometimes the most significant. So you may have actual talents and abilities and propensities and blessings for dying, that is to complete your experience. And that might be the deepest part of it, like the best part of school, I would imagine, but also the most important part of school is the last second of the last day, because that releases you, but also it completes your training by training you to the clock. That will be your future in an industrial society, a punitive wage peonage system based upon arbitrary cooperation and coercion of a clock. And so that last second of the last day, just that you would think that that's a clock can relieve you of 12 years of school with and without your consent, with and without your parents' consent. That last second of the last day, it's the actual blessing. That's the best part of school, but also the most daunting, because that completes your training. You're now thoroughly indoctrinated to that clock. One thing I did want to complete with this video that I don't want to lose sight of is that I think that one form of hell would actually be to make a person be creative, to impel a person, compel a person to do anything. Running can be creative. To impel a person, compel a person, like with a pitchfork or some form of coercion, to run with and without their consent, with and against their will, but impel them. That might be a form of hell. But also to impel a person to be creative, like, so to express yourself is to be creative. So if you impel a person to express themselves, even if you were to give somebody a stick, like you demand that someone you got this cool job, like your first job you're working at as a clerk, it's not that bad. You just take money off of people's hands and get paid to take money off of people's hands. But you also got to run this promotion, so you have to be enthusiastic about selling people something, like signing people up for something. Make sure you tell all the customers this. Make sure you be creative about winning people over to this thing that may not be in their best interest, and so you're being forced to actually beg like that, but you're also begging against someone's best interest, which is a little bit of dishonesty. So they're forcing you to be dishonest. Not only are they forcing you to be creative, but they're forcing you to be dishonest in promoting something that's against another person's will, but also best interest, but also your best interest, because you're all people. That's like a form of hell like that. Some of the hell that we experience in these jobs. Also, the horrible music that you would listen to around horrible coworkers and entitled customers and menial tasks, that might be something of hell too. But like with the plants like that, it's like a form of entheogen, and the frog substance is an entheogen, the actual poison, the self-protective mechanism, no difference than the self-protection of a plant. And there may a lot of things that exist, like organic things, animal, plant. There may not be an actual overlap in terms of their real existence. That a plant may be there's a static component to living and an active kinetic component. Your plants may be some of your static component that makes the active kinetic component possible, which would be like the animals. But the animals may not exist without the plants, and you may also say that the plants may not exist without the animals. I'm also including fish and insects when I say animals. But according to this film on Vice, is that the earth, it has fertility cycles, and these frogs that they poach for their poison, to enjoy their poison, they're deeply connected to and correspondent with the actual fertility cycles of the earth. And that's understood on a deep level by some of these people that study the frogs. So from that standpoint, the earth itself, life itself, it has an ebbing and flowing of like potency, like sensuality, sexuality, life affirming, life giving, life birthing. But also you have to balance that and check that. So there may also be a death component, a dying, and there's also a death within fertility, because you actually die within in making love. The deepest part of making love, the most scary part of making love, is that you actually die to your partner. You die in the hands and at the feet, the lap of your partner. If you are received, that may be the deepest blessing there is, to be that humble, to humble yourself as a man to the point of becoming a baby again, helpless again, your essence again, reduced to your essence in the presence of someone that would inspire you. Because a woman is nothing if not inspirational, to my taste. I think Osho said something about that. Women are inspirational. You die to a woman, how vulnerable you are to that, but also how it's still up to her to receive you or not. That may be the most, that's the most daunting thing in life, because she still can reject you and let you flounder. So, but that she could let you flounder, but she also chose to accept you. That's probably that may be the deepest. That may be beyond what's reached for when people say ecstasy. That's beyond ecstasy. What would you not sacrifice for that? What would you not give of yourself for that? What would you not do for that? That now I'm starting to talk like a parent there, but I'm not yet a parent. But even within that, in true lovemaking, it's actually dying. In older terms, like now we have certain words that refer to like the climax of like sexual activity. And like, I'm not gonna quote that just to keep the tenor of this video. What we were familiar with some of these words. Some start like with the letter J, or some start with the letter C of like what the climax is. But in older times they had similar notions, because a lot of things don't really change. They in essence, a lot of things, most things, maybe all things, don't actually change. They just improve or like go through phases. But they would have older words for like what that means to like really make love and like come to the point of making love. And it would be something about dying. Like it'd be about dying, like dying to someone. And so even in lovemaking, in sexual activity, there's a lot of death in that, and a lot of what makes that attractive and appealing and fun is actually, a lot of it is actually similar to death and is a part of death. But then completely different to that, but also supporting that, is just death. Is that wherever you have lovemaking, the vulnerability of lovemaking, but also the potency and value of lovemaking, and the currency of sexuality, sensuality, you also have danger and death that is not too far away. So death is intimately part of lovemaking and actually life itself. Death makes possible life. Life may not actually have meaning without death. If we were immortal, well, I think we actually are immortal, but that we're actually immortal because we're mortal. And so being immortal doesn't mean you can't die, but it means that you can not die if you make the best decision. There's this film called Highlander from the 90s. That's a good example of immortality, because this man was immortal. He's like from Europe, the highlands of Europe, but he could die if he had his head severed. If he was decapitated, he would die and lose his immortality. So he was something of a near immortal. But that's more immortal, being a near immortal, because you can live, but you can also die, what makes you more of alive, that you could die. Sometimes they say, this is going to be deep what I'm going to say right here, but they say the one true and living God. If God is actually living, that means that God can experience joy. If you can experience joy, you can also experience risk and danger, because you may say that there may be nothing of joy without risk. Like, one of the coolest things that people can appreciate of any range of stature is like the experience of like a motorcycle. A lot of young people really like motorcycles, but also so do adults. That might be one thing it's interesting, that both young people and mature people almost like and relish adult. That might be the one unification. That might be the singularity of life, may actually be motorcycles. It's interesting that we always get kids up on bikes when they're young. There's something very natural about the phase of childhood, about getting up on a bicycle. And bicycles are actually always dangerous. Even a young child on a bicycle, that's still very dangerous. But we don't encourage them to ride motorcycles. Something, I think, high school, the later parts of childhood, it actually breaks us and makes us willing conformists. And I think that part of breaking us and making us fit into the society is indoctrinating fear. And so we're encouraged to be children, happy children, take risks, enjoy, have joy as children. But also, that's part of our development, because even to become adults, we need to experience joy and risk to get to the point of being an adult. But to continue that way, to be childlike, not childish, but childlike, That's actually to our strong suit as an empowerment, but that's a disempowerment to the society, which needs our cooperation, but also our sacrifice to be profitable. So we're actually inculcated in fear, I think, by the time we get to be adults. And so we give children bikes, but we also take bikes back away from children, or the confidence to be comfortable around bikes in danger, that is, as adults by and large. But that might be one thing that's singular about life, is that most people think motorcycles are cool, or at least interesting, or they garner attention from almost any walk of life. Male, female, old, young, motorcycles have a certain, I used to think motorcycles were what's called God when I was young. Like whatever a motorcycle is would speak to me similar to what I would hear people use the word God when I was young, like cool daddy, big daddy, even cooler than my daddy, who didn't ride motorcycles back then, would be motorcycles. But I think they're still like that to a lot of people. But that sensation of joy of a motorcycle, it's actually part of the risk of a motorcycle. So if there's one true and living God, and God is alive and vital, vibrant, that means that God can also experience loss, risk, suffering too, because that's part of the experience of being alive. So there would be something that even God can lose, and maybe even, as we would call God, deathless and immortal. If you can't have your cake and eat it too. So if you are alive, if you are immortal, that is alive, you have to have the potential to die. Otherwise, being alive doesn't have meaning. It's not actually alive. So that portrayal of a near immortal with the Highlander series, that was very poignant. That he was near immortal. He could live many lifetimes and experience a lot of loss, but were he to be struck or injured the wrong way, he would even cease to exist. But I got a little bit off with that. But a lot of life, it's like that, where death gives life meaning. That's what I meant with that. Even if were you immortal, your immortality wouldn't have meaning without the potential to die, or you having seen people die, or you at least understanding what death is. The Buddha, who was appreciated as, you hear a lot about a lot of religions, but a lot of people don't go into Buddhism a lot, the allegory of that, the lessons of that, I think, like by and large. But with Buddhism is that he had lived a very sheltered life. He had all the things he wanted, but he sensed that when he sensed that he had been sheltered from the sight of death. That was actually you could say that some people say he is righteous because he disavowed his kingdom, but actually he was probably more so just wanting to enjoy more, or enjoy fully, by relinquishing the entitlement and actually understanding what death is, because thereby you can have a fuller experience of what life is. So there may be something deeper about the story of the Buddha than you could appreciate on the surface. Is that the Buddha was a Buddha. He had the best of things. That's how his parents would have it for him. Any parent would have the best for their child. However, if you give your child the best of things, but you also shelter them from what's actually the worst of things, death, they may not be able to have the best of things, because you can't have a full experience of life without proximity to, familiarity with, and then maybe at one point the experience of death. So we may actually have, so death may be part of what actually makes life real, but even the things that bring life into being is closely attended by death. So like even a lot of, we're called a tournament mating species as human beings. A lot of people have died in the line of service, in the line of getting, of looking for romantic opportunities. A lot of people have died in that line, in that way. But even animals will like do similar things, like bucks, like fighting to tooth and nail, like with the that's what the antlers are for. Is like for fighting around lovemaking. So you can enjoy your life, but if you want to have another life, or you want to have the best of life, you got to risk it for the biscuit. That's even true for deers, some of the most beautiful and sublime animals, even cows too, because like cows are very serene. You can appreciate a lot of like what's called like serenity, like what you would imagine like a yogi or a very advanced spiritual person, if you're just simply around cows, because they exist like that. But even cows have a bull. So if the bull wants to get to be a bull, he has to risk it for the biscuit. But so I meant to say death is part of life, and opportunities to die are also connected with opportunities to live. And I wanted to put that as part of the supply and demand series, and not go past that. I have some other ideas, but I think that's about a complete video there. And I'll come back when I got more food for thought and ammunition. But with the frogs, is like you have that death current and that life current that are both necessary. And it's like almost like that might actually be what the wavering of the waves is in the ocean. It's like that pulsing of life, the life and the death up, down, life, death, new wave, old wave, new wave, old wave. And that's the deepest pulsing. Like, a lot of people have made love before. You've probably made love to yourself, to a member of your same gender, or a member of a different gender, or maybe I think nothing's limited. So there's any expression of lovemaking, but it's deepest when it's pulsing. That's when lovemaking is on another level. And I think that a lot of people have already had the sensation of making love, like sensuality, but seldom, once in a while, it's more of a pulsing, and that's when it's total like that. But I think when you actually do get to an experience of lovemaking that's pulsing, is that I don't mean just in the act of lovemaking, because lovemaking actually it's a pulsing activity, but there's a pulsing that comes through you in lovemaking that's finer than in informing the actual pulsing of lovemaking. And I think that when you actually experience that, you may actually be making love at a time when the entire earth is in a cycle of love making, of sexuality, of pulsing, the exact the beauty, the terror, the joy, the ecstasy, the devilishness, the purposes of life and death both. And you may actually be, that may be some of the sensations that you don't know when you do get around to making love, that you had actually done so within the timing and the cycle of the earth, and even the broader existence, when it really does connect like that, and it's pulsing like that. And I don't think you're the same after that. If you have an experience of making love to yourself, to a member of your same gender, or a member of a different gender, when it gets to pulsing like that, I don't think you're the same person after that. And so these frogs are in tune with that. And but I'll leave that one there for this video. Peace.